If you're building an AI model in 2026, the default choice is obvious. Python, PyTorch, maybe some Hugging Face on top. Nobody questions it because nobody has to. The entire ecosystem is built for exactly that stack. So when I decided to build a decoder-only language model completely from scratch, tokenizer, attention mechanism, training loop, inference server, all of it, I did the thing nobody does. I wrote it in Rust. No PyTorch, no Python runtime anywhere in the stack.
And I want to be upfront about something before you assume this is a Rust is just better video. It's not. This video is the honest reasoning behind one specific decision made for one specific project with the trade-offs included, not just the wins. I'm going to walk you through 4 real reasons I chose Rust, with real detail from the project, an LLM decoder called aarambh-studio, now on its 3rd major version, and then I'm going to tell you exactly where that decision cost me. Let's get into it.
Before we dive in, I want to talk about Aarambhic Dev Hub's partner, Codecrafters, and this one I actually mean it when I say it is a good one. If you have been watching Aarambhic Dev Hub for a while, you already know that we are all about understanding how things actually work under the hood. Not just using tools, but truly understanding them. Why does Redis work the way it does? How does Git actually store your commits? What is really happening when you type a command in your shell? Codecrafters is built around exactly that same curiosity. Codecrafters is a platform where you rebuild real developer tools from scratch. Things like Git, Redis, a shell, an HTTP server, a DNS server, a BitTorrent client, you actually build them yourself, stage by stage, in your own language. Every stage unlocks the next, and you can see exactly how far along you are as you go. Now the most popular language on Codecrafters is Rust, and that makes total sense for this channel. If you're just getting started with Rust and want to learn it the right way, this is honestly one of the best approaches out there. Instead of reading theory or doing small exercises that go nowhere, you sit down and build something real. Something you have actually heard of. Something that exists in the real world. And that is when Rust really starts to click. This is not your typical tutorial platform where you just watch someone else code and feel like you learned something. You are the one writing the code, you are the one debugging it, you are the one making it pass each stage. That kind of active, hands-on learning is what actually makes you a better systems programmer, and I will be honest. It is genuinely a lot of fun. The challenges are used by engineers at companies like Google, Meta, and Shopify. And if your company has a learning and development budget, there is a very good chance Codecrafters is covered under it, meaning it could cost you absolutely nothing out of pocket. Worth checking with your manager before you pay yourself. The link is in the description below. Check it out, and if you do sign up through it, you also directly support Aarambhic Dev Hub, so thank you in advance if you do. Alright, now let us get into the video.
Before the language question, there's a more basic one. Why build any of this from scratch instead of just fine-tuning something that already exists? Fair question. The honest answer is that fine-tuning an existing model teaches you how to use a model. Building one from scratch teaches you how a model actually works, why attention has the shape it has, why KV cache memory grows the way it does, why quantization introduces the errors it introduces. That understanding was the actual goal of this project. The model itself was the byproduct. Once from scratch was the goal, the language question stopped being about which framework has the most tutorials and became a question about what I was actually going to be doing day to day. Writing low-level tensor operations, managing memory layouts by hand, and eventually running the whole thing as a production inference server. That's a very different set of requirements than just importing a training library and calling one method to fit a model. That's the lens for everything I'm about to walk through. Here's something people miss about Python is slow. When you use PyTorch normally, Python barely does any work. You just call the model on your input and Python hands that off to C++ and CUDA kernels underneath. Python is the conductor, not the orchestra, so its slowness mostly doesn't matter.
That stops being true the moment you write your own attention mechanism instead of calling someone else's. And aarambh-studio's third version implements 4 different attention variants per layer: full attention, deep-seek sparse attention, gated delta net, and multi-head latent attention, switched per layer based on a schedule. That's orchestration logic I wrote myself, token by token, layer by layer. In Python, that orchestration logic runs through the interpreter every single time, every layer, every token, every forward pass. In Rust, it compiles down to native machine code once, ahead of time. There's no per-call interpreter overhead sitting between my logic and the CPU or GPU. When you're the one writing the loop instead of borrowing PyTorches, that difference stops being theoretical. Reason 2 is the global interpreter lock. If you've done serious multi-threaded work in Python, you know the rule. Only one thread executes Python bytecode at a time. To get real parallelism, you spin up separate processes, and separate processes means separate memory, which means duplicating your model weights across every process if you're not careful. For a model that's several gigabytes, that adds up fast. Rust has no GIL because there's no interpreter to lock in the first place. For the inference server side of aarambh-studio, I used Tokio, Rust's async runtime, paired with Axum, a web framework built directly on top of it, so both share the exact same runtime instead of bolting on a second one. Candle handles the tensor and neural network side, meaning the model itself, not just the server wrapped around it, has zero dependency on Python or libtorch. And for the request and response bodies, since the server speaks the same schema as the OpenAI API, I lean on Rust's standard serialization tooling to move data in and out as JSON. Here's how a single request actually flows through that server. Every incoming generation request is handled asynchronously, which means the moment it hits a waiting point, like acquiring a lock on the shared model, Tokio can pause that request and go serve a completely different one on the same thread instead of blocking. The model itself is wrapped so it can be safely shared across every request at once, combined with a lock that only lets one request actually run inference at a time, while every other request queues safely behind it without duplicating a single byte of the model's weights. The incoming request gets automatically parsed into a typed structure, and if it's malformed, it never even reaches the generation logic. Once the lock is acquired, the model runs its forward pass, and the result gets handed straight back out as a response. Every point where that function waits is a point where Tokio can juggle other connections. That's what fearless concurrency actually looks like in practice, and it's structurally harder to get in a language built around a single global lock. If this is giving you a clearer picture of why someone would actually choose Rust for something like this, not just as a trend, but for real reasons, hit like. It helps this reach more people. Subscribe if you want more of this kind of deep dive. Let's keep going. Reason 3 is the one that saved me the most debugging time, and it's the hardest to appreciate until you've been burned by its absence. When you're implementing your own attention mechanisms and managing your own KV cache, instead of relying on a mature library that 1,000 people have already stress-tested, correctness bugs get dangerous and quiet. Take something as simple as 2 pieces of code both trying to touch the same cache buffer at the same time. In a language without Rust's ownership rules, that's the kind of bug that shows up as subtly wrong model output 3 training runs later, and you have no idea why. I actually hit exactly this while working on the KV cache logic. I tried to grab 2 separate mutable views into the same underlying buffer at once, planning to update each half independently. Rust's compiler flatly refused to build it, with an error that boils down to, you cannot borrow this buffer as mutable more than once at the same time, because both of those views pointed at the exact same memory, and the compiler could see that clearly, even if I couldn't in the moment. That's precisely the kind of aliasing bug where 2 parts of an attention kernel would silently stomp on each other's rights. The fix was to explicitly tell the compiler how the buffer splits into 2 genuinely non-overlapping halves, at which point it could verify there was no overlap at all and compile cleanly. I found out about that bug sitting at my desk at compile time, not 2 hours into a Kaggle training run staring at loss numbers that quietly stopped making sense. That mattered a lot for the KV cache work specifically. Multi-head latent attention brought the measured cache down from 1,024 elements per token with full attention to 528 elements per token, essentially a 2 times reduction, and that's exactly the kind of low-level buffer math where a silent aliasing bug is easy to introduce and painful to find later. Reason 4 is about shipping, not building. A typical Python ML deployment means a requirements file, a specific Python version, usually a virtual environment, and hoping the right CUDA-compatible wheel resolves on whatever machine it's landing on.
With Rust, one release build produces exactly one compiled binary. To run the server, that binary plus the quantized model file is genuinely everything you need. No interpreter, no site packages folder, no dependency resolver deciding what version of what library shows up at runtime. When aarambh-studio exports a model in that compact gguf q4_k_m format, the entire deployment story really is copy the binary, copy the model file, run it.
Reason 5 is what makes the first 4 possible without compromise. Candle, the tensor and neural network library the whole model is built on. Candle is Hugging Face's Rust native framework, and using it meant there was never a point where I had to drop into a C extension or link against libtorch. The entire path from tokenizer to training loop to inference is Rust, top to bottom. Loading the weights is a good example of what that actually looks like in practice. Instead of reading the entire weights file into memory up front, Candle memory maps it straight off disk, the same safe tensors format Hugging Face uses in Python, loaded here with zero Python runtime involved. From there, building something like an embedding layer just means pulling its weight tensor out of that mapped file by name, creating a small tensor of token IDs on whichever device I've targeted, CPU or GPU, and running the lookup. That's the whole point of reason 5. Every other reason on this list only holds up because there was a real capable Rust-native ML library underneath all of it. Without Candle, none of the rest of this was realistic. Let me put some actual numbers behind all of this instead of leaving it abstract. aarambh-studio, it's on GitHub under Aarambh Dev Hub, renamed partway through from Aarambh AI, so if you find old links calling it that, it's the same project, is now on its 3rd major version, Apache 2.0 licensed, source only, meaning I release the code but not pre-trained weights. Version 1 shipped across 15 phases, pre-training, supervised fine-tuning, GRPO alignment, INT4 and GGUF quantization, handwritten Flash Attention v2 CUDA kernels, a thinking engine, safety guardrails, self-learning. Version 2 added long context scaling with Yarn and NTK, a proper eval harness, Dora, vision support through a frozen clip encoder, mixture of experts, multi-GPU training, DPO, speculative decoding, and the OpenAI-compatible server you heard about earlier. Version 3, the one running now, is the attention rewrite, gated delta-net, deep-seek sparse attention, multi-head latent attention, fine-grained MOE with a shared expert, multi-token prediction, on-policy distillation, native quantization-aware training, and a max thinking mode that reasons for up to 16,000 tokens before answering. The default layer schedule keeps every 4th layer on full or sparse attention and converts the rest to gated delta-net, with 6 of those slots upgraded to latent attention. That combination is what took the KV cache from 1,024 elements down to 528 elements per token, and let the base context window of 2,048 tokens stretch to a practical 16,384 with Yarn scaling. All of it trained on free Kaggle T4 and P100 notebooks, no dedicated cluster, no rented A100s. If you're working on anything like this, Rust, AI, from-scratch systems, come join the Discord. Links in the description.
We run a weekly study group every Sunday, and it's genuinely one of the better places to get unstuck on this kind of low-level work with people who are building, not just talking.
Now, the part I actually think matters most, because a video that only lists upsides isn't telling you the truth. Rust cost me real things on this project. The ecosystem is smaller. Python has PyTorch and Hugging Face transformers and years of research code you can borrow from directly. Candle is good, but it doesn't have that depth. A lot of what aarambh-studio does, I had to implement myself instead of importing it. Compile times add friction too. Iterating on a training loop in Python means edit, rerun instantly. In Rust, every change goes through the compiler first every time.
And the learning curve is real. Ownership and borrowing are not intuitive coming from Python. I spent genuine time fighting the borrow checker before it started fighting for me instead. So here's the honest verdict, not the hype version. If your goal is fine-tuning an existing model and shipping it this week, Python and PyTorch are still the faster path, and I'd say that to anyone who asks me directly. I chose Rust because building this from scratch, understanding every layer instead of importing it, was the actual point of the project, not a side effect. Different goal, different answer.
If this project or this channel has been useful to you, the biggest way to support it is through GitHub sponsors or Buy Me a Coffee, both linked in the description. It goes directly toward the time and the compute behind projects like this one, and it genuinely helps me keep building and open sourcing this work instead of gating it behind anything.
So that's the real answer. Not Rust is better than Python, but 4 specific reasons that made sense for this specific project. No interpreter tax on custom attention code, no GIL, so Tokio gives real concurrency, compile time correctness on low-level buffer logic, and single binary deployment with zero dependency hell. All of it only possible because Candle gave me a genuinely capable, fully Rust-native ML library to build on. And the honest cost, smaller ecosystem, slower iteration, and a real learning curve. If this gave you a clearer, more honest picture of when Rust actually makes sense for AI work, hit like. It helps this reach more developers. Subscribe if you want more from-scratch breakdowns like this one. Drop a comment. Would you build a model from scratch in Rust, or is Python still the obvious choice for you? I read every comment. Full source is links below if you want to dig into the attention implementations yourself. And I've got a separate video breaking down the wider Rust AI ecosystem. Burn, Candle, Polars, Pyo3, linked in the description if you want to go deeper than just this project. Join the Discord, links below, and thanks for watching, and happy coding.